Real estate investment practice problem using Excel loan amortization schedule worksheet with no tables, part 2. Get ready because it's time to raise the stakes with real estate. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. If you have access to the Excel worksheet, would like to follow along, note that down below we have the 3 tabs. We have the example tab, the practice tab, and the blank tab. The example tab, in essence, being an answer key. We're going to go over there and take a look. We have the information on the left-hand side. In prior presentations, we started to build our worksheet, adding this information in our blank tab. Now we're going to be adding then the amortization table. In future presentations, we're going to be adding the yearly breakout for the 30 years, the amortization table being for monthly payments, which will be 360 periods. Now, the second tab, the practice tab, will have pre-formatted tables, which will make it a little bit easier to populate the data if you want to make it a little bit easier and do a little bit less formatting, but still enter the data. The third tab is the blank tab, which we will be updating from scratch, from nothing. Last time we entered the data on the left-hand side. This time we're adding the amortization table. So we got the home price was $500,000, 20% down payment, then the $100,000, the loans at the $400,000, the year's 30-year loan. 30 times 12 is 360 months, 360 payments. Rate, we're going to say, is the 5%. We use the payment calculation to get to the $2,147.29 payments. If that is the proper calculation, when we get to the bottom of the amortization table, this thing should totally be paid off. So this is a confirmation that this information has been done correctly, that being the amortization table. We then got the total payments and the total interest that we calculated for the life of the loan. Now we're going to be adding the amortization table. As we do so, remember, we're not going to be using like tables in terms of pivot tables or using slicers or anything like that because they can be somewhat intimidating. We will use those in future presentations, and I'll try to point out as we put this together how I might differ the data if I was planning on adding pivot tables or not planning on adding pivot tables. A couple different formats that I would have. Whether using tables or not, we typically do not want to start our amortization schedule right next to the data in the same cell on the right-hand side. We want a little bit of space. So column C, I'm going to make it a little bit skinnier by putting my cursor between C and D, left-clicking and dragging on over so we got a nice skinny column. Then we're going to add our headers. Note, we're going to have some headers that are going to be longer than one column wide. So in other words, if you had a header that was a very long, I'm just going to make up a header here, a very long header, then your options in that header is to increase the column, or you can wrap the text. So I could go ahead and wrap the text, go to the Home tab. You don't have to do this. This is just an example. Home tab, alignment, wrap the text, and that will wrap it for us. But notice what happened when we did that. It messed up the data on the left-hand side. It wrapped the text. It made this whole column much longer or much wider. It will also do that for the whole worksheet to the right-hand side. So I would not wrap the text unless I have to, because it limits my options for other things I need to do. Now, if it was a table that I was going to be putting pivot tables in, I might do that, wrap the text, because that'll make it a little bit easier to add the table. But if I'm not going to be adding a pivot table, I usually will not. Also, just note that if you want to tell it where to wrap the text, you could then, or you can even not wrap the text, right? I could say don't wrap the text, double click somewhere, and then I'm going to say if I want to wrap it right there, you could say Alt Enter, and then that's way you can kind of manually wrap the text and tell it exactly where you want it to wrap. I'm going to undo that. We're not going to wrap the text, and that means that what I'm going to do instead is use however many rows I think I need for the cells, and then format those rows so it looks like a nice worksheet with one header. So I'm going to start with the column 2 because we're going to need 2 columns in order to use that method for our headers. We're going to have periods, which are going to be years. I'm going to add the years, which will be 1 through 30 years. I'm going to add the months, which are 360 months that we will have. We're going to have the payment, which will be this payment we calculated for the full 360 time period. Interest, which is going to be the calculation of the interest that we're going to have. And then we got the reduction in the loan amount, which I'm going to use my 2 columns or 2 rows now I'm going to call it loan reduction. You might see it called balance reduction or loan principal reduction or something like that. But it's going to be the decrease in the loan after each payment. And then we're going to have the loan balance, the amount of the loan that is still remaining after each payment. Notice I have 2 columns or 2 rows for these two when I put these headers in. Now I'm going to format it to make it look nice. So we're going to put our cursor in D1, drag on over to I2. We're going to go to the Home tab. We're going to go to the Alignment group and center it. Then I want to make it black and white, and that'll help me to kind of show this as one header and not have these little spacers in between here. So we're going to go to the Font group, going to go to the bucket, go to the black on the bucket, and then I need to see the letters by making them white. Go into the letters and making them white. So there we have it. So now I'm going to add the periods. I'm going to start with the months. So I'm going to add the months here. There's going to be 360. We're going to autofill in order to do it. So I'm going to put 0, 1, 2. I'm going to make sure to start at period 0. I'm going to select those 3 cells, and I want to grab the fill handle and drag it all the way down to 360 periods. So grab the fill handle, left click, drag it down. It gives us that nice little number thing on the right-hand side. So we know when we got to 360, there it is, and enter. I'm going to center that while we're still have them highlighted or selected by going to the Home tab, Alignment, and Center. There we have it. Now I'd like to add the years. The years are not required, but the years can be useful when we start doing other things later. So everything that's in year 1, I would like to refer to it as year 1. So meaning year 0 is year 0. Year 1, I'm going to do this with a formula. I'm going to say this equals, and then scroll down to that number 12 down below, and then divided by 12. So that's going to be everything in year 1. I'm going to say enter. I'm going to add some decimals so you can see what I'm doing here. Home tab, numbers, add a couple decimals. Then I'm going to take the fill handle, drag that down. This is a little bit of a tricky method here, but once you get it, it's pretty easy to do. We're going to drag it on down to 13, and you can see everything that's in year 1 starts with a 1. Although it's kind of a messy thing because it's not a 1 exactly. And then year 2, we got number 2. Why does that happen? Because it's taking the next cell down, dividing it by 12. So that works out nicely. Now, how can we make it so it makes it just a 1 exactly? I don't want these decimal places. You could try to remove the decimal places, but that won't work because it's going to round this one up to 2, for example. So we have to get a little bit tricky, a little bit fancy in our formula, and we're going to use a round down formula. I'd like to round all these down to 1. So if anything's between 1 and 2, I want it to be 1. If anything's between 2 and 3, I want it to be 2. We use round down. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to do it again using our round down function. There's a fancy little function, but easy to use. Round down. So we're going to say equals round down. Double click on that one, just like the sum function, but it's a round down. Then within the brackets, I'm going to pick up that number 12 again and divide it by 12. Now I need to tell it what unit we want it to round to. So we got to do one more thing. I got to hit a little comma here to have the next argument. And I put a 0 to say I want you to round it to the whole number, is in essence what that 0 means. And there we have it. Now this one, of course, rounded. We knew what it was going to do. Let's do it one more time before we drag it down. I'm going to say this equals round down, brackets. And then we're going to go down to number 13 here. I'm going to divide that by 12. And then we're going to say comma and 0 for the number of digits. Enter. And so that rounded down to 1 exactly as well. So if I copy that down, if I put my cursor on the fill handle and drag that down to number 13, you can see on number 13 it goes to 2. So it's a nice little formula. That's a little tricky way to do this. There's a little bit of a catch at the bottom that we'll have to fix, but it works pretty good. So I'll put my cursor on the fill handle, drag it all the way down here. Drag it on down to 360. And you can see at the very bottom down here, it doesn't quite work down here because we're out of numbers. So what I'll do here typically is I'll delete these and just clean it up and just say this is going to equal the one above it. Just equal the 30 above it. And when I drag it down, it will always equal the one above it. So if I drag it down, this one equals the one above it. So we'll just drag that down and finalize it, finish it up there. And then I'm going to center these. I'm going to drag this all the way up again. And let's center those by going to the alignment and center. Let's then remove the decimals. We don't need those decimals anymore. And there we have it. So that looks pretty good. Okay, so now also note that if, like this 0, you may not need that 0 here, but if I was to add a pivot table, then you'd really want data in every kind of cell. So I would try to fill every cell with something. If there's nothing in it, I'd put a 0 in there. I'll do the same thing for these two. We're not going to have anything in these two cells, which is fine for this table. But if I was to add a pivot table, I would usually enter a 0 or something in these cells. Our first data is going to be at the loan balance. The loan balance at period 0 will be that 400,000. We don't want to hard code or type the 400,000, but rather pick up all of our data from the information on the left. So I'm going to say equals left, 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 left on the keyboard. Pick it up. There it is, and B4. So I'm going to say enter. We're going to do the same thing with the payments. The payments are always going to be that 2,147.29. Although remember that is rounded. It's actually a little bit different than that. But we're going to use that number. And I don't want to hard code or type it in there. I want to say equals and then pick up that 214729 and enter. Notice I have not added the pennies here. We could add pennies if we want. I'm not going to include them because I think it clouds the thing a little bit and it's a little bit easier to see without them. And I know this is kind of a long table, so I'm not going to include it. Now the interest, you could do this. I'm going to do this on the side a couple times just to see what we are doing. And we'll do it 2 different ways just so you can understand how the interest is calculated. So one way, this is the way I would normally see it. What I would normally do if I was doing this in a calculator, I would take the loan balance, 400,000. The rate is 5%, but that's a yearly rate. I'm going to go to the number, percentify that. So if I was to multiply this out, 400,000 times 5%, I would get a yearly amount of 20,000. But this is a monthly payment, so I could take that 20,000 divided by 12, 20,000 divided by 12, and I would get the monthly amount. You can also do it this way, which is useful to know with Excel because you'll often see this format. You could say, well, if that's the yearly rate, making that a percent, I could divide that by 12 to get the monthly rate, which would be the 5% divided by 12. That's an ugly number. That's why we don't use it often. We usually work with a yearly rate, percentifying that. We get this uneven, ugly number. But if I was to multiply that times 12, this times 12, we get to the same result, not times 12, times the 400,000, we get to the same result. So we're going to try to do that with a formula over here. We'll do the formula to do that. As we do that, we're going to pick up absolute references. So when I copy this information down, we'll be able to copy the proper cells down. Also note that this one should have been an absolute reference because I'm pulling information from a table outside of my data set over here. That means when I copy it down, I don't want this cell to move down. So I could say F4 on the keyboard. That puts a $sign before the B and the 9. You only need a mixed reference, which is $1, but 2 works and is easier. When I copy that down, then that cell's not going to copy down with it. The interest, I'm going to say this is going to be equal to the 400,000 prior loan balance. That one does want to move down as we go down. No absolute reference necessary. Times. Then we're going to be picking up the 5%, but that's the yearly rate. So that would give us the 20,000. So I'm going to divide that by 12, and that gives us then that 1667 about. So now we get the payment of the 2147 minus the 1667 means that's going to be the reduction in the principal. In other words, this is going to be equal to, if I pick that 2147 minus the 1667 payment minus the interest, that's going to be the principal reduction. Also note that I think I mixed, did I get the absolute? This 5%, if I double click on this interest again, this 5% in B7 is another one that's outside of our data set. We don't want that 5% to move down when I copy it down. So I'm going to put my cursor in B7, select F4 on the keyboard, $sign before the B and the 7. Okay, and then we got the loan balance. This equals the 400,000 prior balance minus the loan reduction 481. And we got the new loan balance after the first payment, 399,519. Now I'll do this 2 or 3 more times, and then we'll just copy this all the way down. So payment is always going to be the same. It's going to equal that 214729. I don't want that to move down because it's outside my table. Therefore, I need to make it absolute. F4 in the keyboard, $ before the B and the 9, tab. Interest is going to be equal to the new loan balance, 399,519, times the interest rate, which is the yearly rate of 5%. That's outside my table. Therefore, I need to make it absolute. F4 on the keyboard, $ before the B and 7. And I also need to divide it by 12 because that's the yearly rate, and we need the monthly amount. Notice these two amounts are slightly different due to the reduction in the loan balance. So interest will be going down, loan reduction then going up. The loan's going to go down at an increasing rate as we go on through. So this is going to be equal to the same payment, but now the interest is less. Therefore, the loan reduction is higher. It's not a very big difference right now, but it will be very significant at the bottom here. This will be equal to the prior balance, the 399,519 minus the 483. Let's do it 2 more times. The payment is going to be equal to the 214729. We need to make that absolute. F4 on the keyboard, $ before the B and the 9, tab. The interest is going to be equal to the new loan balance, the 399,037, times the interest rate, which is 5%, but that's the yearly rate. We're going to have to divide it by 12. That's also outside of our table. We want it not to move down. Therefore, F4 on the keyboard, absolute reference, $ before the B and the 7, tab. We're going to say then the loan reduction will be equal to the 2147. Oh, notice I didn't divide it by 12 there. I got this very large number problem. Double click on that. I didn't divide it by 12. Let's divide it by 12. There we have it. That looks like it's in sequence. This will be equal to the 2147 minus the 1663. And then finally, with the loan balance, it's going to be equal to the 399,037 minus the 485, and enter. Let's do it one more time, and then we'll just copy it on down. This is going to be equal to the 214729. That needs to be an absolute reference. F4 on the keyboard, $ before the B and 9, tab. Interest is going to be equal to the prior loan balance times the rate. That's a yearly rate. It's also outside of the table. So I'm going to F4 on the keyboard, $ before the B and 7, and divide it this time by 12. Get the monthly amount, tab. The loan reduction equal to the payment minus the interest. There's the loan reduction, and this will be equal then to the 398,552 minus the 487, and enter. Now I'm going to try to copy this down. As I copy it down, anything that's coming from outside of our data set, anything that's in the data set over here, not in like our table, we need absolute. So I'm going to double check that. This one's absolute with a $ before the B and the 9. This one's absolute. That's the B7. This one doesn't need to be absolute. That's going to be the I6 because it's inside of our data over here, inside of our table. And this one doesn't need any absolute, no $, because these two need to move down as we copy down. These two don't need to be absolute, no $, because they want to move down as we copy down. Then I'll select these four rows or these 4 cells and then put our cursor on the fill handle. I'll usually drag it down one time first. So drag it down one time and just double check, does it do what you think it should? If I double click on this, there it is. Notice if this was not absolute, it would have moved this cell down and it would be 0, and we'd see that, and then we could fix it. This one, is it doing what we think? That one looks right. This one is correct, and that's because it's an absolute reference. If it was not absolute, that cell would have moved down, and it would be 0, and then we get a 0 answer here. That would mess us up. This one, no absolutes. These ones move down just like they should. And then this one, these two move down very nicely. So now we can copy this all the way down 360 payments, selecting these four items. We could then grab the fill handle, drag it down, or you can just double click the fill handle. That's the nice magic way of doing it. Just double click on the fill handle and it picks it up all the way down. Now as we scroll down, notice the difference. We got the payment will be the same, interest will then be going down, and the principal will be going up. And that difference is going to become quite distinct or a lot as we go through. So if we go all the way down here, we're in year 21. Now you can see this difference is much different than at the beginning. Final payment, we got the same $2,147, but only 9 of it is interest. 2,138 principal. Loan balance now at 0. That 0 is our double check that we got this thing correctly formatted. So let's go ahead and total this up. I'm going to say total. I'm going to sum up the payments equals the sum. Shift 9. I'm going to get the up arrow, holding down Shift, and then I'll use the page up to get up to the summit of the summing column so I can sum it up, and then enter. And then we'll copy that across. I'm going to put my cursor on this one. I could copy that across, which will sum up these 2 columns. Fill handle, copy across. We don't need to copy the loan balance because that doesn't make sense because this is the balance as we go. We might have our check figures over here because we had some double check figures just to make sure these are correct. This equals, I'm going to tab up to the top, the total payments, that 773,023, which we calculated by just taking basically the payments times 360. And that's the same. That looks correct. This is going to be equal to just our check number that we had up top, which we calculated, which is going to be that 373,023, which we calculated by taking the amount of the total payments minus the loan balance of the 400. That looks right. And the 400,000 is the amount of the loan, which is the principal that we have paid off. And so that's the loan balance right there. So we can kind of check out our numbers. So this is a good check, huge check. And then this is kind of a double check that we've entered this properly. We can also match this, of course, up to the online calculator, as we saw in a prior presentation. Here's an online calculator, 400,000, 30-year, 5%. And we get a similar kind of calculation here. And we can then take a look at their amortization table, which is nice, but not as maneuverable as ours will be if we want to do other things to it, as we'll see in future presentations. You might check like the last payment. They have pennies involved, cents, which we do not, but they have about $9, and then 2138, $9 and 2138. So right there, we could add pennies just to double check. Then take the pennies off just so it doesn't look quite so messy. Then I'll just format this. I'm going to select these items down below. I'm going to make them blue, and I like to put little brackets around them. That's what we'll typically do. So we'll go to the Home tab, Font Group. Let's hit the drop down here and put some borders around it. I'm going to put all borders, so you got those little brackets around it. Font Group, and then I'll hit the bucket, and I'm going to make this blue. Now, if you don't have that blue, what you could do, it's right here, and it's in the More Colors group, and it's in the Standard, not the Custom, the Standard, and then I'm using that blue right there. And so that's the one I typically will use. And there it is. And then I'm going to select this one all the way up to the top. I'm not going to select these items because there's nothing there, so I won't make them blue. Select this one all the way to the top. And let's make these blue by going to the font group. We'll hit this one, and then we'll make them blue. So there we have that. And there we have it. So we got our nice little table. I'm going to delete these items, K and L. Putting my cursor on K and L and remove them because we're going to use those cells later. Right click and delete. And so there's our amortization table. Now note we got it by month over here, and then we got the years telling us each monthly payment which is in the proper year, but we might want that yearly information broken out by total payments per year, interest total per year, loan per year, and loan reduction per year. And these things will change. The payment will not change year over year, but the interest and loan will change significantly, which again could have significant tax implications when you're making long-term projection types of calculations. So next time, we're going to break this information out and by a year-by-year type of calculation, which is something that's a little bit more difficult to do if you were to do like an online calculation amortization table. So you got a lot more flexibility. And then in future presentations, we'll also add pivot tables and show how you could break this out using pivot tables, which gives us other options as well.